another minute or so for folks to join. I see lots of people in the waiting room. We'll give folks some time to join here, but please go ahead and while we are waiting, please rename yourself to show your name, comma, and your agency. And we want to welcome you to our fourth CalPro Administrators Forum webinar. Today's webinar will be on cultivating a thriving adult learning environment by focusing on student and staff well-being. So that is a great topic for this wonderful June Tuesday, and we thank you for being here with us. My name is Sharice Moore, and I am a principal TA consultant with the American Institutes for Research. I get the pleasure and honor of working on the CalPro project. It is an amazing project that really supports professional development for teachers and administrators and classified staff throughout the state of California and adult education. And I am joined by Josie Cleveland. Josie, you might have received an email from and a reminder about our webinar starting right now. And Josie will be providing any tech support that you may need during the webinar. Again, a few more folks are joining, so we are welcoming them all. But again, as you join, please be sure to change or rename yourself with your name, comma, your agency, so that we know who you are. This is our Administrators Forum webinar series, and today marks the fourth of the webinar series that we have had this year. We do this every year. We've been doing this for about a dozen years or so, longer than that possibly. And during these webinars, the idea was really to have a venue for adult education administrators and leaders to come together quickly to be able to engage with their peers on what at that time was called hot topics. And these were topics that really impacted and had the ability to help us think through management, sustainability matters that were impacting our program overall development in our field in adult education. And they proved very beneficial for administrators and leaders. And so we have continued to provide this space, and that's why we call it a forum, this forum for administrators to come together and talk about things that are hot topics and big issues that we together can work through. I'm going to turn it over to Josie to give you just a little bit of reminders. I know we've been using Zoom for a very long time, but these are just some quick reminders that she'll go through with us. Josie.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It is so nice that you guys are here. We are very excited about today's webinar. So as we get started, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll find all your menu functions that you'll need for today, including chat, reactions, your video, all of those good things. Feel free to use reactions at any point today to give nonverbal feedback. And you can also raise your hand if you have questions. And if you raise your hand and you ask your question, please be sure to lower it afterward. Feel free to use the chat at any point to ask questions, to engage, to give feedback, all of those good things. We welcome you using the chat. If you're attending with someone else from your site, please put their name into the chat as well. That way we know who's in attendance today, and we will keep those records. And lastly, this webinar will be recorded. It is already recording already, but we wanted to let you all know that it is going to be recorded. That way others can view it after today. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Cherise.
Thank you, Josie, so much for those reminders and letting folks know that we are recording this and it will live on our CalPro website for you. Josie, it went into that mode and I wasn't done with the slide. So can you
Oh,
bring up?
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Thank you. All right, so you are eligible to receive a certificate of attendance for today's webinar. If you are interested in having that certificate for participating in today's 1-hour webinar, please email us at calpro@air.org, and we will be happy to get you a certificate for your participation in the webinar today. And then our webinar today is going to be focused on this topic of student and staff well-being. And we are delighted, wonderfully excited about today's presenters. We have Kathleen Porter, who is the Executive Director of Career Technical Education and Alternative Education at Poway Adult School. That seems to have cut off from my title for you, Kathleen. Sorry about that. And then we have Stephen Kasperite, who is the assistant principal at Placer School for the adults. Stephen currently serves in that role, but he will become principal starting on July the 1st of this year, so in a little less than a month. And he has 37 years of experience in education, working with students from kindergarten through college, and specializes in supporting wounded and traumatized learners from all walks of life. This focus has led him to pursue a PhD, and that will be focused on the impact of suffering and trauma on human consciousness development. In his personal life, he's a dad of 3 wonderful adult children and has been in a fantastic partnership for many years. Kathleen Porter has been involved in adult education, CTE, and workforce development for youth and adults in the San Diego area since 1987. She is currently the executive director at Poway Unified School District of CTE and adult education. And in this role, she oversees their adult school, their partnership program, the district's alternative programs, online courses. She's also past president of CCAE, a former teacher, resource teacher, career guidance specialist, and previously also worked as a director of the East County Career Center, a part of San Diego's Workforce One-Stop Partnership. So you have 2 amazing, amazing folks who will be leading us through our session today. And I'm not going to take up any more time, but know that there will be question opportunities after they are done and during the presentation. And when we finish, we will invite you to share your feedback with us. So now, Josie, please make the switch. Thank you.
Thank you, Cherise, and good afternoon, everyone. Stephen and I are happy to be here with you. And I think, Stephen, since Cherise did such a nice job of introducing us, I think I might skip our own introductions and we'll just hop right into the content. So we are going to be spending about the next 50 minutes with you. And we've got an agenda here, but I really wanted to focus in on the 4 objectives that we've identified for this afternoon. So we're going to spend a little time identifying the factors that are contributing to the need for a well-being focus. We're going to consider different elements of the research basis for well-being at work. We're going to explore some practical tools and strategies that can help us support both our students and our staff and their well-being. And then we'll take a minute to outline some possible next steps that you can take to focus on wellness for yourself, for your staff, and for your students. So at this point, I'm going to turn things over to Stephen, and he's going to take us in a deep dive to look at some of the background.
Oops, I went ahead. Thank you, Kathleen. Welcome, everybody. From what I can see, it looks like we've got 42 participants from around the state. So that's wonderful. It's always wonderful to be able to participate with our cohorts from around the state. I wish we could see you live and in person, but technology makes this possible. Before we get started, I want to just say, let's all take a deep breath. We're going to dive into a lot of information. To think that we could cover the background of this topic in one presentation would be, well, be assuming a lot. So we're going to give you bits of information, and at the end, we're going to share resources with you. So sit back, put your seatbelts on, enjoy the ride, and know that resources will be made available to you. And we will pause for questions, but mostly we're going to be moving along, and maybe at the end, your suggestions could say, hey, CalPro, let's do another one of these and get a little deeper. So background. So as noted, I've been in education for 37 years, and my specialty has been struggling and wounded learners. And that's every walk of life, adults, people in the workplace, you name it. And so I came to the point in my life where I said, I need to do some research on this. And so this really started quite a while ago. So what does the research say? So this is the beginning of a deep dive. The effects of trauma and suffering on the development and expansion of human consciousness. That's my actual research for my doctoral dissertation. So what does that mean? Let's see if I can get this. There we go. Sorry, folks, I'm getting a little delay on this. So consciousness, what is consciousness? This is my interpretation from looking at this from just about every facet I could, from psychology, from neurobiology, neuropsychology, physics, spirituality, you name it. And what it comes down to is consciousness is the ability, and this is shorthand, to inhabit your place in space in time fully. Trauma impedes consciousness. So when I see somebody in the workplace, when I see a student, when I see somebody who's not fully able to inhabit their space and place in time, instead of saying, oh, there's somebody who doesn't fit the job, or the old labels that we would throw on things like this, I ask the question, what's going on? What's the struggle here? And lately, there's plenty of that to go around. So what Kathleen and I looked at was, what's a deep dive to inform you to begin looking at the picture a little bit differently? So suffering, and suffering happens in every facet of life. But there are two types of suffering. One type of suffering that leads to the desire for change and the ability to overcome. And the other type of suffering is the suffering that leads to trauma. And there's a very thin razor's edge between the two. So when you see somebody who that suffering causes them to say, hey, I need to make a change in my life, they begin to thrive, that creativity opens up. But when you see that person who's suffering and they look like they're not moving anywhere, they're in the workplace, the student, that's the beginning of trauma. And there's micro trauma, there's large trauma. Trauma is not just PTSD from being in a battle zone. Trauma can be being in the workplace. It can be any part of life. So trauma is an event that took place in the past, and the past could be yesterday. It is also the imprint left by the experience on the mind, the brain, and the body. What's the difference between mind and brain? Well, brain is this apparatus up here that computes, it takes in information, but mind takes in the whole being, takes in social, emotional experiences, everything. So trauma is the experience that affects the mind, the brain, and this is the key one, the body. This imprint has ongoing consequences for how the victim manages to survive in the present. So we see it in the workplace. We see people who can't get past a certain task that needs to be done. We see it in every functional level of life. The question is the font of creativity consciousness? And if that is the case, if creativity is actually that consciousness, that ability to inhabit where I am, my place in time, then how do we move from trauma to a reopening and a capacity for creativity? When somebody in a classroom space, in a workplace, in just a life space, when they've lost that spark of creativity, what's impeding that? What's keeping them from moving forward? And those are the questions we have to turn around and ask. And that goes for ourselves. It becomes with a deep dive experience of going, why? Why do I feel stuck? Why am I not moving forward? So about 22 years ago, I started working with really highly what I call wounded learners and special needs students, both on the autism spectrum, Asperger's, and those that had social emotional trauma. And I was invited to go and study at the Mind Institute at UC Davis, which was fascinating because something I learned from that experience, two key things that were takeaways for me at that experience was the plasticity of the brain. The brain can constantly create new neural pathways. And what I call the ability to develop mental flexibility. Mental flexibility is the ability to see something coming at me that needs to be completed, or a task, or some kind of event, even could be even a car accident, and be able to see that there's a way out. There's a way to do something different. There's a way to change my environment. There's a way to change what's happened to me. When somebody no longer has the capacity for that plasticity, that mental flexibility, that's where the question has to become, what's the next step that I can do to support this person, help this person? From there, I was able to access research into the CDC Centers for Disease Control Prevention ACEs study. I first encountered that about 19 years ago. There's a great video and it's dated, but it still ties into some really great evidence that came out of that. The work of Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris. She was the first one to grab the ACEs study and start applying it to the workplace, to her students, to her coworkers, and begin to realize that the trauma that people face may be something that happened yesterday, or maybe something that happened 30 years ago. And it's still affecting how they exist, how they thrive. In many cases, it was the students I was working with and the struggles that they had to move forward. And they were students from every walk of life. So these tools are available to you. If you have not seen this, if you have not looked at this, follow the tools, follow the links, and take a look at that video. But before you do, take a deep breath and realize that you may be looking at some of your own trauma in the process. So be clear about that. This is and if it's too much, step away, step away. From there, I went into the research of Basil van der Kolk, and he wrote this incredible book called The Body Keeps the Score. If you have not seen this book, it's been around for a little while, but he's a neurologist who's been working on this question, post-traumatic stress syndrome. He's been looking at this subject for more than 40 years, and he's looked at every walk of life. And he talks about how these traumas, micro traumas, workplace traumas, life traumas, traumas in education, they live in the body. They manifest on how we present ourselves in the world, how we are able to accomplish our tasks, the life tasks that are put in front of us. The Body Keeps the Score, wonderful text. And again, like I said, we're not going deep here. We're just giving you small little tidbits to try and begin to spark those questions and open up some maybe thoughts. And then I wanted to share real quickly an example of two students that changed my whole outlook. And I'm forever thankful to them. One was Jacob and the other was Josh. Jacob was happened to be on the spectrum, and Josh was what we call neurodiverse. A lot of his neurodiversity was caused by social emotional trauma throughout his childhood. Both of these students I worked with in a classroom. One was an adult student, the other one was a K-12 student. I worked in a classroom setting, and what I noticed from the very get-go was how much fear they presented when it came to working on any kind of project that was put in front of them. And I began to go back into the research that I had done and apply that. And one of the key ingredients that was a really simple ask was to create a safe and welcoming environment every day, consistently. That meant I had to look at myself and my own struggles, before I entered that classroom. So the classroom had to become a sacred space before I ever entered it with these students. So I had to do my own survey of myself on a regular basis. And as they entered the classroom and working with their peers in that classroom, because it wasn't just an isolated classroom, it was working with their peers in that environment, I had to ask the question, how are we creating an environment that is welcome and open? I have to tell you that both of these students went on to complete what they set out that looked like impossible tasks for both of them. They completed their high school diplomas because the environment that was created for these students created an environment where they began to feel like they could succeed. We began to tap into their mental flexibility and their creativity. And it was a profound experience, not because it was orchestrated by me, but it was orchestrated by all the people that were surrounding them. One experience was a group of students deciding to create a garden space. And both of these students, both was an adult student, the other one was a K-12 student, became participants in that garden space creation. That garden space gave them an outlet to participate with people from every walk of life and see a way for them to express and experience their creativity. So this is the thought I want to leave you with before Kathleen takes the next deep dive for us in looking at creating healthy workspaces. Community creates a haven for healing trauma and growing curiosity. So I want to just let you pause on that for a minute and think about that. And when you're thinking about the workspaces, your students, your home life, we're giving you tools. How are you creating that haven for healing trauma and growing curiosity? When you see curiosity starting to fade, you have to ask the question, what's going on in their personal lives? All right, Kathleen, I think the next slide is yours.
It is. Thank you, Stephen. So our next question, you can either unmute or type in the chat, is really, why do we want to focus on well-being? What is it that why do we want to focus on well-being? What are we hoping to see as a result of focusing on well-being? Thank you, Erin. To cultivate the greatest common good, right? If one is well, one can learn. Absolutely. We're hoping to see individuals who are functioning members of our society. People will want to come to work or to school. Well-being creates an openness to learning, you bet. Students and staff can thrive in their endeavors. Less stress equals more retention. To make sure our students and staff are successful and better our mental health and being able to have a healthier lifestyle, class success, raise self-esteem and confidence, create balance in life. Many of my students are overwhelmed by life, let alone learning English. I'd like my students to do as well as they can. Students who are excited about learning and are participating fully in class. Happy people are more productive because they enjoy their job. Improves attendance. Absolutely. All of those things. We know that when people feel well, when people feel like they belong in environments, when people feel a sense of community, attendance increases, productivity increases, persistence increases, and of course, outcomes increase. So I want to take a look at how we might measure and how we might manage well-being. And to do that, we're going to take a look at 3 different measures that Gallup has put together for us. So one of the things Gallup explores is these 5 essential elements of well-being. They also talk about Gallup Net Thriving, which is also referred to as your best possible life. Are you living your best possible life? And then Gallup also developed these 12 questions. So these are just 3 easy tools that we can use to measure well-being in our workplace and with our students. And then we can also think of strategies and tools to put in place once we've measured how people are doing. So the 5 essential elements of well-being are these. And so career well-being is really that you like what you do every day. Social well-being is that you have meaningful friendships in your life. Financial well-being is you manage your money well. Physical well-being, you have the energy you need to get things done. And community well-being is you like where you live. You're connected to where you live. So I want to take a second. On our next slide, we have a poll. And I want to ask you, which one of those 5 essential elements of well-being would you most want to focus on for yourself? And then the second question is, which one do you think is the most difficult to focus on with your team members? So if you could just take a second and answer those 2 questions on our poll. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the results then. So it looks like most of us feel that what we would most want to work on with ourselves is physical well-being. That is very common. That is very common for us to all want to get in shape and focus on having energy to do the work that we need to do. So if we take a look down here below, we've said that the most difficult one to focus on with our people, with our teams, might be community well-being. And so we're defining community well-being with you like where you live, or you feel connections to the community where you live. So interesting. We'll take another look at this. And Lori said they are willing to take risk if they feel safe. Thank you. So let me close the poll and we'll move forward, and we're going to come back to thinking about what we can do to take action with each of those. But the next way we can measure well-being in the workplace is this Gallup Net Thriving. So this is the GNT. And so you imagine a ladder with steps ranging from 0 to 10. And then you say, on which step of the ladder would you say you currently stand at this time? And on which step do you think you will stand about 5 years from now? And so again, you're giving yourself a ranking of 1 to 10. So this is something you can do with staff. This is something you can do with students. Where do they see themselves? And so when you think about how do we categorize well-being, or how do we measure well-being with this simple little tool, it just takes a couple minutes. If you see somebody having at least an 8 or higher in where they see themselves in the next 5 years. So let's say their present life situation is a 7. In the next 5 years, they're going to be an 8 or higher. That person would be categorized as thriving. And so these are people that have fewer health problems, fewer sick days, less worry, less stress, less sadness, less anger, more happiness, more enjoyment, more interest and respect. When you look at people who are kind of in the middle, so these would be folks who would be rating their current life as below 7, and they're not seeing hope for the future. They're either staying the same or they might actually see a decline in the future. These would be people that we would categorize as struggling. And so these are folks who might be struggling in the present, or they expect to struggle in the future. They are more likely to smoke, and they're less likely to eat healthily. And then for people who have poor rankings, so let's say they evaluate their current life situation at a 4 or below, and they have negative views of the future over the next 5 years. So again, they're giving themselves a 4 or below. These are people that are actually suffering. And so when we're talking about these folks that are actually suffering, they're more likely to lack some of the basics like food and shelter. They're more likely to be in physical pain or a lot of stress, to have worry and sadness and anger. They may have less access to health insurance and care, and they're just basically the folks that we really want to pay attention to. And I'm going to give us some tools to pay attention to them, so I'm not leaving them behind right now. In the next area, we're talking about measuring employee engagement. And so some of you might have seen these before. These are 12 questions that Gallup asks, and you rate each question on a scale of 1 to 5. And these 12 questions, and I think Josie's going to put the link to a survey. These 12 questions thank you, Josie. These 12 questions will start to help us understand employee engagement. And engagement is kind of this outgrowth of well-being. And so you can see how some of these questions line up to those dimensions of well-being that we looked at first. So the career, the social, the financial, the physical, the community. So some of the questions that leap out at us are, I know what's expected of me at work. In the last 7 days, I've received recognition or praise for doing good work. My supervisor, somebody at work, seems to care about me. There's a person who encourages my development. At work, my opinions seem to count. The mission or purpose of my company makes me feel my job is important. I have a best friend at work is one of the questions. And so these are some of the questions that can help us gauge engagement and see how we're doing. So again, these are tools that can help us measure well-being in a workplace or with our students. And now we're going to hop into some of the tools and strategies. So one of the things that Gallup has put together in this book on well-being, the 5 essential elements, is specific tasks that a manager can take. And I've created a little excerpt for you. Patrick asked, do we need a best friend at work? You know, it's funny because that particular question always throws people, Patrick. And the research would tell you yes. And they are very deliberate in calling it a best friend at work. And so why do we think that is? It's somebody that is going to believe in you, is going to tell you the truth, that you can be your full self with at work. And so people that have this best friend are more productive, have higher attendance rates, all of those kinds of things. And then I think what it tells us as managers is how are we creating opportunities for people to create those relationships that are really meaningful, important relationships at work. And so on this next little piece, and I think Josie, you're going to put this link too in the chat for people, but I know some of you might just be using the QR code. I just excerpted from some things from the book that are strategies, and I just limited it to 3 in each category. So you can see the dimension of well-being, things that you can ask yourself, things that you can ask your team members, and then how could you take action? And again, the book has many more than 3, but I just kind of took 3 of the highlights from each one of these. And so if we go down to social well-being, so let's say that one of the things that we notice is when we do this survey with our staff, that most of our staff people don't say that they have a best friend at work. So we might want to focus on social well-being. So these are some things that you can ask. Do we spend enough time, social time together as a team? Do you think there's somebody on our team that needs your support and attention today? How do we show support for one another on our staff? So just getting staff members thinking about these things. And then the actions, creating opportunities for people to learn about one another and both their personal lives and their work lives, celebrating personal and professional successes as a team, and mixing social time with physical activity. So in some of these areas, they notice, oh, well, maybe you could have a walk and talk meeting. Maybe you can skewer some of these things. So you're getting outside of the workplace, you're talking, or maybe you're meeting outdoors. Anything like that could actually contribute. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Stephen. He's going to talk about some more tools and strategies for us.
Always remember to unmute my mic. All right, I'm back. As you can see, Kathleen and I have been trying to weave and blend these processes and ideas. We start with the individual, what is their need that's not being met? And then we go to the group. And now we're going back to some tools, just like the book, the well-being book. There's some tools that I've put up here, and don't panic. These are all going to be available to you. We're not going to go deep into them, but sometimes different needs call for different tools. Anybody who's been a teacher for a period of time has a vast toolkit available to them. And if you've been an administrator, that toolkit gets even bigger. So there's a great tool, and this link is going to be shared with you. It's called Self-Assessing Educator Social and Emotional Competencies and Instruction. It's put out by AIR, which is the mother company of CALPRO. And whether you're an administrator or a teacher, you can use this tool to kind of self-assess your own social and emotional competencies when you're creating that safe workspace that creates an environment where people want to be a part of. The next tool, which is called the Adult Learner Variability Project. It's a wonderful tool. It's put out, I can't remember the name of that, but it's put out by the federal government. But in that tool, there's a adult learner part of it, and you can look at creating tools for developing well-being in the workplace, social, emotional, trauma-informed, and it gives you access to all kinds of wonderful little lesson plans, group activities, you name it. What they all boil down to, and this is partially my own bias, but there's been so much evidence on this. As a matter of fact, one of my peers in the doctoral program is actually studying the effects of mindfulness practices. A lot of us call that meditation. You can call it prayer. You can give it any name you want. But really what it is it's learning how to self-reflect. Self-regulation comes from self-reflection. If you're in an environment where there's never time to self-reflect, then there can be no self-regulation. If everything in your environment is an emergency that has to be dealt with right now, then there's no time to self-reflect. And without self-reflection, there's no mindfulness. And without mindfulness, we are moving from what I call the fight or flight panic mode. It seems that that has become more prevalent. If you look at the data and the statistics that are out there right now, one of the highest incidents of adult issues in social emotional is stress. The stress levels are moving off the charts. And so what this is asking is to give yourself permission. Give yourself permission. I want to repeat that again, to come back to yourself. How do I do that? It isn't just a matter of sitting in your chair and saying, okay, I'm going to calm down. When did that ever work for anybody? Mindfulness practice is actually cultivating a self-reflection practice. As I said, you can call it prayer if that's what your agency is. You can call it what you need. What I'm giving you is some tools to look at mindfulness practices from many different levels. And an excellent book is by John Kabat-Zinn is Wherever You Go, There You Are. We can't run away from ourselves. I tell my children all the time, when they were younger, they were going to run away to here, to there. And I used to tell them, well, wherever you go, you're going to be there. It's going to be you, nobody else. You can't escape you. So whatever environment you find yourself in, most of the time, it's something you need to reflect on in yourself. And that takes me to the next exercise. And I'm going to actually show you how to do this exercise. I call it the circle exercise. I walked into an office environment that was incredibly toxic. And as a part of the management team, I had to work with the team to try and figure out how to deal with the toxicity in the environment. And so we began a 2-year deep dive into what was going on. And that means we had to reflect on ourselves first as a management team, and then begin to work with the team to reflect on what the team was seeing. And out of that exercise, we came up with some ideas on building something together. Not everybody that you work with in the office place is going to be your best friend or somebody you want to hang out with, but they are going to be people that you're going to spend a significant amount of time with. And in that environment, sometimes it helps to get out of that environment and build something together or a service project together. I want to give you an example. When we finished towards the end of these 2 years and working with this office environment, we made a lot of changes and a lot of growth. But what we did at the end of it was we did 2 things. We built a small garden together on our campus. And the other thing we did was we started volunteering twice a year for service projects as a team. One of them was this last year, we went and helped at the Salvation Army package up Christmas gifts to go out to the community. We spent a whole day, got permission from our district to go do it as a school. And the smiles on everybody's faces, we took pictures of the before and after, and the smiles on everybody's faces after having served somebody else, where they were like, the endorphin high of the year for everybody. And lastly, a book to share with you, Think Again. When we're moving in that fight or flight brain, where we're moving no self-reflection, we're just moving 100 miles an hour to get things done, We're driven. There's no time to stop and think, could I have done that differently? Could I have thought about it in a different way? So this is a latest book that has come out by Adam Grant. He's a psychologist, and he argues that to pause and think again would begin to unravel some of those knots, those Gordian knots that represent themselves in the classroom space, in the workspace, at home, in life. So we've given you a lot of resources. So deep breath, mindfulness here. Wow, that's a lot of resources. What are we supposed to do with all of that? Well, you're going to write to CALPRO and say, hey, let's have part 2 of this and part 3 so we can unpack these and actually put them to use. There's a shameless advertisement right there for CALPRO. Okay, so I'm going to share this with you. This is a video called The 5 Chairs. And if you've never watched it, it's on YouTube, it's free. And she goes through the steps of thinking again. Because a lot of times the problems that we see happening in the workplace are because I have no time myself to think again. And so I'm part of the problem, not part of the solution. So she tells a wonderful story of how you become a part of the solution. And then, as I promised, I'm going to share with you the circle exercise. So this is where our team got to. And this requires a lot of work to be safe enough to be vulnerable. We created what was called the circle exercise. And what we did was we had a meeting And everybody got a big sticky, and on it they put this circle. And the circle had 4 quadrants. And you could be as vulnerable as you were willing to be. And in the 4 quadrants, on the horizontal line, you wrote your greatest fear. Ooh, that's a big one, to write your greatest fear and share that with others. Big vulnerability. And some could go deep and some could go not very deep. On the next vertical line, they wrote, on the vertical line, they wrote their greatest joy. And it was fascinating to begin to see what gave people great joy, because a lot of times we don't take the time to understand our coworkers, our fellow students, where they're at in life. So the horizontal line was your greatest fear. The vertical line was your greatest joy. And then in the 4 quadrants, they wrote personal fears and joys, work-related fears and joys, aspirations and missed opportunities, and something, and this was the getter right here, something you want others to know about you. Ooh. And then they were left up there, and quietly, in a very quiet, sacred way, people went around the room looking at each other's, what they've written. And then we just ended there. We said at the next meeting, we'll begin to unpack it, but we wanted to give people time to just reflect on what they'd seen and what they shared. Community, healing, creativity is about doing something together that makes belonging matter. Brian Solis. When you begin to feel safe enough that you and your environment can work together collaboratively to create something, then you understand that that you belong, and that it changes your whole perspective. You could be working in the harshest environment, but if you feel like you're a part of something, then it doesn't matter, because the environment isn't what changes you. It's how you feel about how you participate. What creativity can you bring to that environment? And what are you encouraged to be a part of? Build a community garden, build something beautiful together, but find a way to begin to unpack all that stress and trauma that is a part of our we've got family lives, we've got community lives, we've got so many things going on. But if we can't take the time to come back to ourselves and unpack those layers of struggle and trauma, then we're going to just continue to repeat, as Einstein said, the same things over and over and over again. Kathleen?
Thank you, Stephen. So here we'll talk a little bit about culture and building culture through routines and rituals. So when Stephen was telling the story earlier about 2 students, and we know from trauma-informed practices that one of the things that we can do to create safe environments for people with trauma is to be predictable. So creating these routines and rituals are an important part of not only creating a predictable environment, but also really creating community so that people understand this is what we do. So when we come to this space, this is how we do it. And so minimizing surprises, minimizing last minute changes, anything that we can do to do that. So another book that we have taken a look at in my organization is this Design for Belonging, how to build inclusion and collaboration in your communities with intent. So thinking from the very first invitation to how you set up a room, what's on the agenda, how do you disagree? How do you get voices in the room? What are all these norms that come together to create this culture of belonging? And then I also created a belonging inventory. And so I have put, oh, Josie, thank you for putting that in the chat. So we measure this as a staff. I ask every staff person to think about, what do we do to create opportunities for belonging? And then we look at the feedback and we look at what more we could do. And then we develop our game plan for the next year. So this becomes part of our goal setting. When we look at meetings, how can we onboard new staff? What do we do to create belonging for students? And what more could we do? And so getting that feedback from everyone, so it's our community. This is how we do things. And then this is just a good quote that I love from Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And that really is true. You can have the greatest strategy in the world, but if you don't have a work team that really enjoys one another and enjoys producing together, you're not going to achieve at the levels that you could. And then another thing I wanted to touch on is just your own well-being. So all of us are in roles where occasionally we wind up doing things in a workplace that are stressful. So how do we create supports for ourselves and supports for our own well-being to do these things in the most comfortable, stress-free way that we possibly can? And so I think it's creating these SOS plans. So what happens if you're in a meeting that is one of these stressful meetings where you're having to have a courageous conversation with somebody? How are you creating, how are you practicing to stop the conversation if it gets heated? So what are phrases that you have so that you're not moving to this reactionary place, that you can remain in the thoughtful place? And so I think I've shared with some of you before, like one of my favorite phrases is, oh, I think there might be more fire than light here. Sometimes you can just say something like, oh, I think this might be a good time for us to pause. Let's stop this conversation now. Let's both sleep on it, and we can revisit it after we've had a chance to reflect, when you start to feel that things are getting really emotionally charged. I think it's always worthwhile to practice some of those conversations ahead of time. You can role play with somebody else. You can anticipate what you might hear back and think what your responses are. And the other thing I think is very important for us is really to think about our own selves and the timing. So making sure that you have time in the day, that like when you have those courageous conversations, we don't want to schedule them at the end of the day. We don't want to schedule them when you only have 15 minutes, but the conversation might be an hour and a half. So how are you scheduling it at a time when you have the most energy, when you have time to bring your best self to that conversation? And so, Stephen, you're going to ask a reflection question here. Oh, Stephen, you're muted.
Ah, there we go. If my wife can only get a hold of that button. I think I wanted to just bring up, Patrick put in the chat, can inclusive be intrusive for the traumatized? And I'll answer that with one quick, and not that there's a quick answer by any means, Patrick, but it can be if the inclusivity is not something that is a part of us working together collaboratively. And what do I mean by that? Inclusive can be something that we force upon everybody. We say, well, everybody needs to be a part, everybody, but that doesn't mean we've studied where that person's coming from. Ask the question, hey, can you explain to me why? Can I, dig deeper? It isn't a quick, oh, they don't want to be a part of the group. And that is a simple answer. Your question is too deep to answer in one setting. What I will say is that we've given you a ton of information in less than 50 minutes. Take away from this, take a deep breath, digest, put down some notes for yourselves, because what we write down counts. Typing it works, but when you take the hand, apply la plume, the pen, and write something down, it actually activates neural pathways in the brain. We know this from neurology. That's why, if you haven't seen it yet, they're bringing handwriting back into education again. Thank God. So anyways, but write your thoughts down and then look at our resources and see what might be helpful to you. You don't have to take all of this information. We hope you walk away with a tool here, a tool there. So here's the question then. Did you hear anything that you could put to use right away? You don't have to have an answer for that. You could say, I need to think about that. Is there anything you're dealing with now that we didn't provide a strategy to help navigate? I'm sure we could be overloaded with those, but please do put it in there, because if there's another opportunity to share out, we'd be happy to do the research and put some more information out there and share with you. We hope this has been helpful. Please put your thoughts in the chat. Wish we could talk to you all in person. That would make it even more wonderful. But otherwise, thank you for joining us. Kathleen, closing thoughts?
Thank you, Stephen. So I think the next thing we wanted to provide you with is the references and resources folder. And so this is where we have links to everything we've talked about here today. Thank you, Josie, for putting that in the chat for us too. And then you have our contact information here. And I think that is it. So we've got 2 minutes if we have any, if you have any questions, or if there was anything that we didn't address that you were hoping to hear about.
Thank you, Kathleen and Stephen. This was a lot of information, and I know that the participants are just taking it all in, and I appreciate the opportunity for us to continue this conversation and to go deeper. And for those of you who are clicking on the bit.ly for the resources or completing the evaluation, it would help me greatly if you found 1 or 2 particular areas within this presentation that you want to know more about, that you want us to go deeper on. And so I have the slide up now with their contact information, but I'm also going to put this slide up where you are sharing in the chat, because we will save that and we'll make decisions about how we continue this conversation based on what you share about things that you're still looking for strategies on, or things that you want to put into play right away, or want us to go deeper on in maybe a future opportunity as we continue this conversation. I saw some things happening in the chat. Here are the resources, and I am going to ask Josie if the slides for us to close out can be brought up. That would be great, the CalPro slides. Okay, wonderful. Oops, it was there and then went back.
Sorry about that.
All right. So right now we have about a minute left, and we want to make sure that you, oops, sorry, don't know what has to do that. But
Okay, here we go. Sorry about that.
thank you. We want to make sure that you have the opportunity to share feedback with us on this webinar overall. There's the bit.ly there, and Josie will put that into the chat for you. And thank you, Josie. And you can also scan the QR code. That's also another opportunity for you to let us know your thoughts around today's webinar. I know I learned a lot, and I know I'm still thinking through, like, who is my best friend at work? And I'm also still thinking through, how am I contributing to someone's trauma or making space for their trauma to begin to heal? There's so many pieces from this session for me, and I know there are for you too. So please use this evaluation to let us know, again, things that you want to know more about. And we appreciate your time this afternoon. We know it's late in the day on a Tuesday, and you showed up, and we appreciate that. And I hope you learned something great from it. We look forward to serving you with a whole new set of 4 administrator webinars in the coming year. We will start that with something in the fall, and your thoughts will be very beneficial into the input of what happens. So thank you all very, very much, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you again, Stephen and Kathleen, and thank you, Josie. Bye-bye, everyone.